The first day of the new semester always brought with it a quiet sense of anticipation. The sound of shuffling papers, the light hum of voices echoing in the hallways, and the familiar smell of dry erase markers all felt oddly comforting. She stood by the window of her classroom, sipping her lukewarm coffee as students began to filter in, each face a blend of nerves and disinterest. She had been teaching English literature for almost 10 years, long enough to know that most students wouldn't care for Shakespeare or poetry until something in the material touched them personally. She scanned the room, greeting students with a nod and a warm smile. Then, her eyes paused on someone unfamiliar. He walked in with a quiet confidence, his head slightly bowed, but his gaze steady and observant. There was something about him, something subtle yet hard to ignore. He didn't slump into his chair like the others. He sat upright, flipped open a small, worn notebook, and started jotting something down. His name, she would later learn, was Alex. The class started as usual. She asked them to write about a moment that had changed their lives. Most students groaned, scribbled carelessly, or asked how many words it had to be. Alex didn't ask. He just wrote. Fast. Focused. 10 minutes later, when they handed in their papers, his was the only one that made her pause. His handwriting was precise. His story, a moment with his grandfather just before he passed away, was raw, elegant, and emotionally mature in a way she rarely saw. She read it again after class ended. There was a line in it that stuck with her. I didn't understand how much silence could say until he stopped speaking. It lingered in her mind, like a song lyric she couldn't shake off. The following day, she made a point to engage him in class discussions. He spoke with careful thought, never rushing, always letting the ideas roll around before forming a response. He challenged the material in ways that impressed her, often seeing layers in texts that others missed. She caught herself waiting for his input, unconsciously scanning the room until he raised his hand. She felt a quiet thrill each time he did. After a week, Alex stayed behind after class. He said he had some questions about the reading, but the conversation drifted naturally into life, books, and the meaning behind certain poems. She noticed how articulate he was, how easy it was to talk to him. Their conversation stretched longer than it should have. When she glanced at the clock, almost 20 minutes had passed. She quickly wrapped things up and reminded herself to keep things professional. Still, over the next few days, it became a pattern. He'd stay back. They'd talk. Always about the material at first. But then about writing, family, ambition, even music. He had an old soul, she thought. Someone who'd seen more than a boy his age should have. He listened deeply. He made eye contact. And, slowly, she realized something was shifting. She was no longer just looking forward to teaching literature each day. She was looking forward to seeing him. She tried to dismiss it. She was his teacher. He was her student. The line wasn't just professional, it was moral. But emotions didn't seem to respect job titles. She started dressing with more care. Not for anyone else. Just in case she'd catch his glance. She noticed when he smiled, when he laughed at her jokes, when he lingered at the door just a few seconds longer than necessary. One afternoon, while discussing a poem about forbidden love, their eyes met. For a split second, something passed between them, something unspoken but undeniable. It terrified her. She closed the textbook and ended class abruptly, heart racing. She didn't understand why she was feeling this way. Or, maybe she did and just didn't want to admit it. She told herself it was a phase, a brief moment of blurred lines that would pass. But it didn't feel like a phase. It felt like the beginning of something she wasn't ready for, and wasn't supposed to want. The next few weeks felt like walking on a tightrope. Every class she taught was filled with invisible lines she tried not to cross. She kept her tone even, her eyes moving quickly past him, her comments clipped and professional. But it didn't help. The awareness between them had already taken root. It lingered in every quiet moment, in every casual glance that lasted just a second too long. Alex continued to stay after class. At first, she told herself it was fine. He was one of her brightest students. He had a real interest in the material. Helping him was part of her job. But somewhere deep inside, she knew that wasn't the whole truth. One Thursday afternoon, it started with a simple question about character development in a novel they were reading. But then he asked why people sometimes do the wrong thing for the right reasons. She froze for a moment. It was too loaded, too close. Instead of giving a textbook answer, she told him, because we're human. He nodded slowly, like he already knew that, but just wanted to hear her say it. Their conversations drifted more often into personal territory. He told her about his mom, who worked 2 jobs and was barely around. About his dad, who left when he was 9. About how he learned to keep his head down, speak only when it mattered, and listen to the world in silence. She found herself opening up too, in small, careful ways, about her past, her college years, how she never felt truly seen by anyone she dated. It was dangerous, the comfort she felt with him. They shared book recommendations, jokes only they seemed to get, and glances across the classroom that said more than words ever could. She tried to pull away, but it felt like trying to unlearn a song stuck in her head. One day, he brought her a cup of coffee. "You always forget to drink yours," he said with a shy smile. She should have stopped him, told him it wasn't appropriate. But instead, she smiled back and thanked him. That cup sat on her desk for hours, untouched but cherished. Rumors hadn't started yet. Nothing had happened. Not really. But something was growing between them, and it was becoming harder to ignore. Then came the poetry assignment. Alex turned in a piece unlike anything she'd ever read from a student. It was subtle, emotional, and full of tension. He described a feeling of being pulled towards something forbidden, something beautiful but off limits. She read it 3 times, heart pounding harder with each line. It wasn't just poetry. It was a confession. She wanted to confront him, to clear the air. But a part of her was afraid of what he might say. So she said nothing. Instead, she gave it an A and wrote, powerful. Raw. Honest. Asterisk. The next time he stayed after class, the air between them felt heavier. She avoided eye contact. He noticed. "Did I say too much in that poem?" he asked, voice low. She shook her head slowly. "You wrote what you felt. That's what poetry is for. But what if what I felt wasn't allowed?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat tightened, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. He looked at her, eyes searching. "You can trust me, you know." She wanted to tell him that wasn't the point. That trust wasn't the problem. That feelings, when they bloomed in the wrong place, could ruin everything. But she didn't say any of that. She just looked at him, torn between what was right and what was real. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying the way he looked at her, the vulnerability in his voice. She reminded herself of the consequences, the risks, the headlines, but the ache in her chest wouldn't go away. She was falling into something she had no business falling into. And the worst part was, she didn't want to stop. 2 weeks later, the school hosted its annual literature showcase, an evening where students presented essays, poems, and short stories. It was her favorite event of the year. She'd always found pride in seeing her students shine, expressing themselves through words. This year, though, she felt a growing anxiety building with each passing day. Alex had volunteered to help organize the event, and of course, she was the faculty lead. That meant working closely together after school for hours. The first few days of preparation were fine. Professional. Busy. Safe. She focused on schedules, printouts, and lighting setups. He focused on getting the student volunteers in order. They hardly had time to speak. But somehow, the silence between them still said everything. One evening, most of the students had gone home. The classroom was quiet, dimly lit by the late sunlight streaming through the windows. They were sorting through the final program sheets, sitting side by side but barely speaking. He broke the silence. "Are you avoiding me?" She hesitated. "No. I'm just focused." "You're not just focused. You're distant." She looked at him, tired and conflicted. "Because I have to be." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes never leaving hers. "Do you think I don't know why?" She stood up, suddenly overwhelmed, walking toward the window. Her voice cracked just a little. "You're smart, Alex. So you already know what kind of trouble this could cause. For both of us." "I don't care about trouble," he said quietly. "You should," she snapped, her tone sharper than she intended. "You have your whole life ahead of you. I'm just your teacher. That's all I'm supposed to be." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he rose and walked toward her. Not too close. Just enough for her to feel the pull again. "I know I'm your student. I know the rules. But that doesn't stop what I feel." And I don't think it stops what you feel either. She looked at him, her heart pounding. There was no way to lie. Not to him, not to herself. She was scared, not of him, but of what she was becoming. The moment hung there, heavy and fragile. And then, without meaning to, she reached up and brushed a piece of hair from his face. Her fingers barely touched him, but it was enough. Enough to say what neither of them dared to speak. She caught herself and pulled her hand back quickly. This can't happen. He nodded, eyes full of something between sorrow and understanding. I know. But it already is. The next day, she wore a mask of professionalism tighter than ever. She didn't speak unless necessary. She didn't stay behind after class. She didn't meet his eyes. It felt like the only way to protect them both. But the silence between them now was different, cold, distant, and painful. Alex stopped staying after class. His energy in the room changed. He was quieter, less engaged. When she called on him, he gave brief answers and avoided her gaze. It cut deeper than she expected. Her colleagues started noticing something was off. "Everything all right in your class?" one of them asked in the teacher's lounge. She forced a smile and nodded. But the tension was getting harder to hide. During the showcase, he read a new poem. One she hadn't seen. It was about loss, loss of connection, loss of warmth, loss of something beautiful that couldn't survive under rules and expectations. The room applauded, but her chest tightened with each line. Everyone else heard poetry. She heard truth. After the event, she stayed late to clean up. Alone. Or so, she thought. He walked in quietly. "I'm sorry if I made things harder for you." She turned, surprised to see him. "You didn't. I made it hard for myself." He stepped forward slowly. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If none of this mattered, if we weren't teacher and student, would you feel the same?" She couldn't lie anymore. "Yes," she whispered. They didn't touch. They didn't kiss. But that moment felt more intimate than anything they could have done. He smiled, not with happiness, but with quiet pain. "Then I'm glad I wasn't imagining it." And then he left, leaving her standing in the quiet, under the flickering lights of a classroom that suddenly felt too big, too empty, and full of every line she was terrified to cross. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. She came into work every day with a knot in her stomach, walking the halls like someone waiting for something to fall apart. Alex stopped participating in class entirely. He kept his head down, didn't linger after the bell, and avoided her like she was someone who had hurt him. Maybe she had. Her other students noticed. They asked casually, "Is Alex okay?" Or, "Did he drop the club?" But she brushed it off with forced calm. The distance was necessary, she reminded herself, even if it felt like punishment. Then the rumors started. They were quiet at first, half-jokes whispered between students when they thought no one was listening. A passing comment in the hallway. A smirk during group work. And then one day, she opened her inbox and saw it, a formal email from the assistant principal asking to speak. Her heart dropped. In the meeting, she was told that a concerned parent had reported a rumor, something about her spending too much time with a student, a few things heard from their child, some speculation about after-school meetings. There was no solid evidence, just concern and whispers, but it was enough to trigger an internal review. They called it standard procedure, but it didn't feel that way. It felt like judgment. She was placed on paid administrative leave, pending investigation. That word, investigation, made her stomach twist. Her reputation, her job, everything she'd built over the last decade, it was all suddenly hanging by a thread. Walking out of the school that afternoon felt like leaving a part of herself behind. Her classroom, her books, her students. She didn't even get to explain. She heard later from a friend still on staff that Alex looked stunned when the announcement was made. He didn't ask questions. He didn't speak. He just packed his things and left school early. The days that followed were hollow. She stayed indoors, barely touched her phone. Her house, usually a place of calm, now felt like a cage. She kept playing the past few months over and over in her head. Every conversation, every look, every choice. She knew she hadn't crossed the line physically, but emotionally. The line wasn't just blurry. It had been washed away completely. One evening, she received a message from Alex. Just one line. "I didn't mean for this to happen to you." Asterisk. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then typed out a reply and deleted it. Again and again. Eventually, she sent one back. It wasn't your fault. We both lost control. Asterisk. He didn't respond. And maybe that was for the best. The school board sent follow-up emails, asking for explanations, meeting logs, any personal communication. She cooperated fully. There were no texts, no proof of anything inappropriate. But the absence of wrongdoing wasn't the same as innocence. Not in the eyes of the community. News spread fast in a small town. Parents whispered. Students speculated. She was no longer Miss Thompson, the favorite English teacher. She was something else now. A story people told with lowered voices. She didn't sleep much. Her mind refused to rest. She wondered how Alex was doing, if the other students turned on him, if the whispers followed him home. Guilt wrapped itself around her like a second skin. She was the adult. She was supposed to know better. She remembered how he used to smile when he talked about books. How he used to stay after class, so eager to learn. And how that eagerness turned into something else, something heavier. She had allowed it, nurtured it, even. One morning, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her eyes were tired, her expression dull. She missed teaching. But more than that, she missed who she was before everything blurred. She got another message, this time from one of her former students. It was short but kind. You were a good teacher. Don't let anyone forget that. Asterisk. She stared at that message for a long time. And for the first time in days, she cried, not from fear or guilt, but from grief. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. Weeks passed. The investigation quietly came to a close. No official misconduct had been found, nothing physical, no inappropriate communication. But the damage had already been done. Her name was tainted, her classroom reassigned. The school offered her a chance to return, but under strict observation, with limited responsibilities. It felt less like a second chance and more like a warning. She declined. Instead, she spent her days in quiet reflection, waking up late, walking aimlessly, reading books she used to love but could barely concentrate on now. Everything that once grounded her felt distant. She couldn't even walk by a school without a sick feeling rising in her throat. At the suggestion of a friend, she began therapy. Not to find excuses, but to understand. Why she let herself get too close. Why she didn't stop it sooner. Why a part of her still didn't regret those moments, not fully. The therapist didn't judge her. She listened, asked hard questions, made her sit with silence. With truth. Slowly, she began to unravel herself. Piece by piece, session by session. One afternoon, during a quiet rain, she wrote to Alex. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I should have set firmer boundaries. You were a student, and I let my own loneliness blur what was right. You deserved better. You still do. Asterisk. She didn't expect a reply. Maybe she didn't deserve one. But a few days later, he wrote back. You weren't the only one who crossed the line. I was confused too. I thought what I felt was something real, something safe. But it wasn't. And maybe that's on both of us. I don't hate you. I just hope we both figure things out. Asterisk. His words weren't angry. They were tired. Like hers. They came from a place of someone older than his years, someone forced to grow up too quickly. She read the message over and over until the screen blurred with tears. She decided, then, not to go back into teaching. It was a painful choice, but the right one. Not because she no longer cared about literature or students, but because she knew she couldn't trust herself the same way anymore. Something had shifted permanently, and pretending otherwise would only hurt more people. Instead, she poured herself into writing. Not stories, but essays. Quiet pieces about the complicated roles teachers play, about the fine line between empathy and attachment. She didn't name names. She didn't try to gain sympathy. She just told the truth as she knew it. Over time, her words began to resonate. Other educators reached out, some with praise, some with criticism, but most with honesty. They had their own versions of blurred lines, of deep connections that nearly crossed into dangerous territory. Her inbox filled with messages. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel so alone. She was invited to speak at a local workshop for new teachers. She almost declined, afraid of being seen, of being judged. But she went. And she told them everything, not the romanticized version, not the victim story, but the messy, uncomfortable truth. She stood in front of the room, voice shaking, and said, "We tell ourselves we're strong enough to stay professional. But no one prepares you for what it feels like when someone looks at you like you're their whole world. It's flattering. It's dangerous. And if you don't draw the line, it can swallow you whole." The room was silent, but not empty. Eyes met hers with understanding. Some with guilt. Some with quiet gratitude. She didn't speak at more events after that. One was enough. Her goal wasn't to become a spokesperson. She just needed to let it out. To tell the truth one time. A year passed. She still thought of Alex sometimes. Not with longing. Not with shame. Just with quiet acceptance. He had been a bright light in a dark time. But he had also been a mirror, showing her what she had refused to see in herself. Her life was simpler now. Smaller, but more honest. She no longer tried to outrun what happened. She carried it, carefully, openly, not as a badge, but as a scar that reminded her of the line she would never blur again. 5 years later, her life looked nothing like it once did. The classroom, the hallway chatter, the desk stacked with essays, gone. She now ran a small nonprofit she had started herself. It focused on mentoring new educators about emotional boundaries and the hidden pressures teachers often face. No black and white rules. No lectures. Just real conversations, real guidance. The kind she wished someone had given her. Her days were quieter but fuller. She worked from a modest office, met with young teachers, listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, she did it with the weight of someone who had lived through the kind of mistake no one warns you about, but that many silently fear. She never used Alex's name. She never shared specific details. That story belonged to both of them. But she used what it taught her. How quickly admiration could turn into something else. How silence, when not addressed, could speak louder than action. One rainy afternoon, she got a message through the nonprofit's website. The name at the bottom made her stop breathing for a second. Alex. He asked if they could meet. Not for anything heavy, he wrote. Just to say thank you. Her hands trembled over the keyboard, but she agreed. She suggested a small cafe, far from her office. When the day came, she arrived early, unsure of how it would feel to see him again. He walked in wearing a dark coat, taller than she remembered. Older. His face was more defined, the softness of youth now sharpened by experience. But the eyes were the same, calm, observant. They greeted each other with a quiet smile. No hug. No awkwardness. Just two people sharing a space heavy with memory. He spoke first. Told her about finishing college. About his work in writing, copywriting for nonprofits, screenplays in progress, a small poetry book self-published. She was proud, but she kept it in her chest, afraid to say too much. He said he didn't come with anger or regret. Just curiosity. And maybe closure. I never hated you, he said gently, stirring the coffee in front of him. Back then, I didn't fully get what was happening. But now I do. And I know it wasn't simple for you either. She nodded, voice low. I should have been stronger. You were human, he replied. That's not weakness. That's what made it complicated. They sat in silence for a moment, letting those words settle. Outside, the rain tapped gently against the windows. He leaned back. That year changed me, not just because of what happened between us, but because it forced me to grow up. Fast. I wish it hadn't had to, she said. He smiled, not bitterly. Me too. But I'm okay. Really. They talked a little more, books, old teachers, what they were both doing now. And then, he stood up, slung his bag over his shoulder. I'm glad I saw you, he said. You're doing something good now. Something important. So are you, she answered. He paused, as if deciding whether to say the next part. I never stopped writing because of you. Even after everything. You gave me that. So, thank you. She watched him walk away into the rainy street, his figure slowly disappearing behind a passing bus. She sat there a while longer, hand resting on the warm coffee cup he hadn't touched. Her heart felt oddly light. There was no perfect ending to that chapter in her life, but there was peace now. And forgiveness, both his and her own. She went back to work that afternoon with a quiet sense of clarity. There would always be gray areas in life, messy places where right and wrong blur into emotion. But she had found her way through it. Not untouched, but not destroyed either. She'd put those lessons into every workshop, every session, every heart-to-heart with young teachers on the edge of burnout or blurred boundaries. She didn't give them perfect answers. Just the truth. And as she closed her laptop at the end of the day, she smiled softly. Some stories don't have a neat, happy ending. But they can still mean something. They can still change you. If this story touched something in you, maybe something you didn't expect, take a moment to share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that explore the raw, real, and complicated sides of being human. And remember, it's okay to be flawed. It's what you do after the mistake that matters most.